Pottery is one of man's earliest inventions, if you could call it an invention, or it's more likely that the very first pots came about more by accident than by invention. When I used to do kids' pottery classes, I told them the story of how early man would have discovered this soft, pliable, natural, ready available wet stuff we call clay down on a riverbank or somewhere, and fascinated by it and fiddling around with it would have probably made a very primitive pinch pot like this one. And marvelling at this achievement, found that such a thing could be used as a drinking vessel or something to eat off. Then a dried out pinch pot was placed beside the fire, and during the night ashes blew over it, and it became baked or bisque fired, as we call it. Very desirable indeed. Suddenly, here was something that was somewhat durable and waterproof. The discovery of glazing added a very waterproof coating to the clay, and this came about a while later. Tiles almost certainly came about due to this same inventive mind. For thousands of years, tiles have been used to cover roofs, walls, and floors of buildings. Many are simple sections of baked clay performing a practical purpose, yet others are beautiful objects bearing fascinating design, colour, and decoration, and intriguing images. Tile making has been long favoured over the ages by artists and craftsmen as a versatile medium for artistic expression. And for this reason, tiles are also very collectible. The word tile comes from the French cuille, derived from the Latin name tegula, meaning roof tile. And tiles are not always square or rectangular, but come in many shapes: hexagonal, semicircular, circular, star-shaped, as we will see as we go along. Their physical durability and permanency is the main reason why tiles have been so highly valued. A well-made and properly fired tile will last longer than any other form of building material. They can be decorated in a myriad of ways, and ceramic tiles and glazes don't fade or deteriorate after they have been fired. And they would have been first made by simply hand pressing the clay into a thin slab and then cutting out the tile, or by rolling the clay into a thin slab with a rolling pin and two sticks to give it thickness, and that's the way I made all of my tiles, and then cutting the tiles to size, or by pressing the clay into a mould. In the very early periods, the moulds were made of wood, and the excess clay trimmed off with a wire hoop or another piece of wood. So now let's begin our journey with tiles made in the pre-industrial era, starting in ancient Mesopotamia. And this map gives a pretty good idea of where this is. It is also known as the fertile area between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. Buildings were usually made of mud bricks, and tiles were first used in the Middle East, where clay was readily available. Here we find the earliest evidence of fired clay being used to clad mud brick walls to protect them from the weather. In the Sumerian city of Uruk in southern Mesopotamia, 3600 BT, rather than actual tiles, we see here thousands of cone-shaped fired objects pushed into the mud columns. The use of fired bricks actually came before what we know as the ceramic tile, and highly decorative glazed brick panels like these were a common feature of early Babylonian buildings. Tiles were also used to record cuneiform writing, as unfired clay tiles were a good medium for use in this way. I think we are all familiar with Egyptian architecture from 3000 BC onwards. Adobe or mud bricks were the chief form of building material, and of course stone was also readily available. But the Egyptians developed the use of faience tiles to cover and decorate many buildings, and they appeared from about the 27th century. Faience is not clay, and is not what the French call faience, but it is a special composition consisting of crushed quartz and a small amount of sand and fired to a hard substance. And when copper silicates are added to the mixture, they produce a lovely blue-green colour. Tombs were well known to be lined with thousands of faience tiles. Faience funerary pectorals like these were attached to mummies to ensure rebirth after death. The one on the right has faience decoration on part of the tile. Tiles in the shape of the lotus were featured on friezes which decorated the palace of Ramesses III. And one further use for the terracotta tile was to make a cartouche, which was an ancient Egyptian symbol containing information about a king or other important member of society and was typically found on the person's tomb or belongings. Greece, Etruria, and Rome. The architecture of early Grecian buildings is described as striated, or post and lintel. It was at this time that the introduction of ceramic roof tiles marks an important milestone in the history of tiles. Flat terracotta tiles were made in abundance, with turned-up edges, and semicircular tiles of slightly different profiles, called imbrex, were made to cover the gaps. This method of roof tiling was soon to spread to Etruria and Rome in Italy, where the roof tiles were elaborately finished at the ends by tiles known as antefixi or antefixes, and these were often very skillfully modelled, also in terracotta, and some with added colour. The Romans also developed a special type of wall tile called tubuli, which were four-sided hollow box tiles used for the distribution of hot air in Roman villas and bathhouses. I guess you'd call it a type of air conditioning. They were built into the wall and decorated with abstract or figurative relief patterns. And the Romans also made other figurative relief tiles in terracotta to adorn their buildings, their villas, and their palaces. Islamic tiles. We know that the Islamic countries, Persia as it was known back then in particular, have been producing ceramic tiles in huge quantities since probably as early as the 9th century AD. The process of tin-glazed earthenware is thought to have originated from these areas. So is it any wonder that intricately coloured and patterned tiles in this method, and other methods, have been used to adorn their important religious and holy buildings and places of pilgrimage from that time onwards. But there are actually four decorative techniques incorporated in the decoration of Persian tiles, which were fired to earthenware temperatures. Thin glazed, which is also known as majolica, delftware or faience, where the coloured pigments are painted on to a tin glaze and then fired. Underglaze painted decoration, the pigments are applied under a clear lead glaze. A process called huera seca, in which lines of wax or magnesium are mixed with grease and are applied to form thin lines separating the glazes. And lusterware, which is the decoration made by painting a paste of clay containing copper oxide over a white tin glaze. Then, when it reaches a certain temperature, it is fired in a very heavy, smoky condition, and then on cooling, the paste is scrubbed away to reveal the luster decoration. Tiles were made by skilled craftsmen in many parts of Persia, but the Kashan area seems to be the centre of ceramic production and lusterware. The body of the tiles is often referred to as stone paste, in which ground quartz or glass are added to the terracotta clay to form this special type of body. A further technique called lajvadina was used on tiles as well. It is characterized by its deep blue color and often features geometric pattern, Islamic script or foliage, and often overlaid with gold leaf. A dark cobalt blue glaze was first applied and then decoration added in on-glaze enamels. They were also made using a turquoise glaze based on copper oxide. While we are still in the same area, it is important to mention the production of tiles in the Qajar period from about 1795 onwards. Craftsmen and artists of the Qajar period employed a range of decorative themes. The use of human imagery, which regularly included the depiction of religious icons, figures of Qajar royalty, is very prevalent, as well as floral and animal motifs, such as can be seen in these early 19th century tile panels. The technique was underglaze decoration, and I think you will agree that a very high degree of expertise in this technique had been achieved by this time. Three more important tile-producing countries bordering Iran or close by should be mentioned at this point. We know that ideas, technique, and processes spread to other areas by the movement of craftsmen and artisans. Islamic tiling processes spread to Spain, Morocco, and Turkey during the Moorish period. Spanish tiles tend to focus on geometric patterns, and this type of mosaic tiling seemed to have been more popular. A mosaic is a pattern or image made of small, rectangular or irregular pieces of coloured stone, glass or ceramic. Floor and wall decorations made of mosaics, such as these, were particularly popular in the ancient Roman and Grecian cultures. But in Spain, geometric tiles shapes were made so that they could be arranged together to form a larger pattern. To create these particular, quite spectacular patterns on walls and floors of important buildings. There are several areas in Spain where tiles are made, but one in particular is the small town of Manises, on the outskirts of Valencia, where tiles have been made since the beginning of the 14th century. And anything in Manises that can be tiled is tiled. It is also a UNESCO Heritage Declared Area. The Museum of Manises contains a huge collection of ceramics made in the area from early times. Tiled ceilings were very popular, such as these. The technique employed is underglaze decoration on earthenware tiles, and unlike the tiles previously talked about, tiles from Manises were or are very colourful and artistically assembled to create beautiful and interesting tile murals, such as the ones I am showing you here. Tiles made in Morocco are known as Zeliga tiles, an Arabic word for a style of mosaic work made from individually hand-chiselled tile pieces. The Zeliga style of ornamental mosaic work dates back to the 10th century and is considered one of the truest expressions of Moroccan culture. The main area for this is the city of Fez. Many public buildings and features are tiled in the Zaliga manner. The process was carried out by specially trained mosaic artisans. Tiles were first made by hand in a wooden mould, sun-dried and bisque-fired. Then they were glazed in several colours and fired again. Once glazed and fired, the tiles are hand-cut or hand-chiselled and assembled into elaborate geometric patterns and motifs, creating very intricate mosaics. The tiles are then assembled upside down into their patterns and joined together with plaster to create a beautiful tile panel such as this one in the Zeliga style. The Saadian tombs are an historic royal necropolis in Marrakesh, Morocco. They date to the time of the Saadian dynasty in 1578 to 1603, though members of Morocco's monarchy continued to be buried here for some time afterwards. This is another fine example of decoration using Ziliga tiles, but in addition here, there is a significant use of glazed tiles on the interior floors and on the exterior courtyards, as we can see in these pictures. Iznik tiles. Iznik, a picturesque town in the Bursa province of Turkey, is best known for being the birthplace of the world-famous Iznik tiles that reached their height during the Ottoman Empire from 1285 AD. The handmade production method employed by the Iznik tile makers was a closely guarded secret, so they say, for many centuries. But the process, which I will explain shortly, has been carried on to this day. Iznik tiles adorned and decorated many of the well-known mosques and palaces in Turkey. The Topkapi Palace, the residence of the Imperial Ottoman court from about 1465, is one of these, as well as the well-known mosques such as the Blue Mosque, which opened in 1617. Iznik tiles were renowned for their outstanding brilliance of colour and design. Stylized, naturalistic floral designs were most preferred by the Iznik tile decorators. Flowers such as the rose, tulip, carnation, viola and hyacinth, to name a few, were deftly painted on the tiles by skillful artists. A characteristic of Iznik tiles was the bright red colour derived from the use of a bowl or a type of clay containing iron oxide, applied as slip under the glaze. The reason why Iznik tiles were particularly bright is attributed to the stone paste body, which contains about 80% of ground quartz, with the addition of enough white clay to bind it together. It is then pressed into a mould, draped flat, and turned out. After drying, it is coated with a white clay slip, which adds to the brilliance of the design. Bisque fired in a wood-fired kiln and then handed to the decorator, who, after drawing the design on stiff paper, pricks the whole pattern with a needle. Then the transfer can be applied to the tile using a charcoal-filled bag. The painter then follows the dots with a black outline. The colour is applied now until completed. The tile is sprinkled with the glaze powder and fired again at glazing temperature, and the result is a beautiful sparkling Iznik ceramic tile.